Let's talk about X, baby. Let's talk about she and he. Let's talk about all the good and bad things on fertility. Let's talk about X. Let's talk about X.
Hello and welcome to the How Do You Like Your Ex podcast. I'm Dawn Chan, your host and a founder of Fertility. In each of our episodes, we invite women to come join us and talk about their different fertility and maternity journeys. And today we've invited Tingi here with us to share a little bit more about her personal maternity journey and how that led her to become a coach. Welcome, Tingi.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me, Dawn.
Of course. So Tingi, you are a seasoned professional in the tech industry. You're working in Google, you've worked at LinkedIn and Apple before, but you're also a pre- and postnatal Pilates instructor. And on top of that, you're now a coach focusing on matrescence. So tell us a little bit more about it.
So matrescence is actually a term that I only came across, I would say, a few months ago. It actually really helped me to name my kind of experience of motherhood. But in short, simple term, I would say it's basically the identity shifts that a woman goes through from the moment of conception through to like the rest of her life as a result of taking on this identity of motherhood.
Oh, very interesting. Is there a source in terms of where this came to be?
Yeah, there's actually a source. There's a website called matrescence.com, which actually talks about where the term was first coined, which I think it was in the 1970s, but then was updated kind of recently in the last couple of years. So that's kind of my basis of like the information that I've learned around the term itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we jump into why and what inspired you to this impact work of supporting mothers and professional women in Hong Kong, let's talk a little bit more about your personal fertility and maternity journey. I know it was relatively easy for you compared to our other podcast guests. So none of the motherhood stories are really just a breeze, right? So tell me more.
In terms of the pregnancy itself, again, I think I was very lucky. I didn't really get sick. I had some nausea, but for the most part, I would say it was really smooth. I think I experienced a lot of back pain. So my children, actually, both of them, ended up having it's called macrosomia. So essentially like when your child is like within the 90th percentile of their age kind of development, they're just like large. And so I was really like front heavy. So I had a lot of back pain. I didn't sleep well. So that's
and that
probably the worst.
started in the second trimester or?
Yeah, I would say I was pretty large. Like I gained 40 pounds in both my pregnancies. So like 80 pounds in total. And so it was just a lot. So that happened really like within the second trimester. And it was pretty tough in the sense of like sleeping, walking, sitting down. But I also ate a lot too. And I think I took that as like, flexibility for me to be like, I can eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But besides physical discomfort and some of the pain, and we can talk about how you started managing it with Pilates, what were the other challenges that came up as you navigated your pregnancy, your new parent life, and even your professional aspirations, right? Because you've always been a sales, strategy, and ops person in all these really top tech companies.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. Again, I keep saying that word, but I do think I've been really, I want to say blessed, because I think blessed is such a cliche word, but to work in some really interesting organizations. And I think going through my pregnancy with those organizations, I did have access to a lot of resources that I think maybe a lot of people don't have access to in terms of like working for local businesses. So obviously they're quite on the forefront of like providing maternity leave, for example, which is a huge one, or even like providing resources and reimbursements for fertility treatments and things like that. So I think in that sense, I was really grateful for it. But I mean, some of the larger challenges that I had, so I would say when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I decided to leave Apple and I started interviewing at LinkedIn. And I was 6 months pregnant when I started interviewing there.
Sorry, was leaving Apple, was getting pregnant part of the reason, or was just purely part of your career progression and whatnot, and then you just at the same time happened to be pregnant second trimester at that time?
Yeah, so what happened was like I was working at Apple. My original kind of experience is actually working in B2B. So I started there as actually a business manager, so actually selling like the Apple ecosystem of products into kind of enterprise and corporate clients. But the role actually got made redundant. And so after that I moved into a sales role, which is a retail sales role, which was really not the right thing for me. And I happened to get pregnant around that time. So there was like a lot of standing, and retail operations wasn't really my forte. And so I started looking to go back into more of like a SaaS sales kind of position. And that's how I ended up moving to LinkedIn. And I was 6 months pregnant at the time, and definitely didn't want to tell the person who I was interviewing with, who was the hiring manager, that I was pregnant, because I didn't want it to jeopardize.
Yeah.
Right. But I also really struggled with that because I wanted to be honest. Like, I didn't want
You want to be
hide.
authentic.
Yeah.
And you want to show up on the job and they realizing you're like 8 months pregnant, right?
So I was really like,
It must be very stressful.
I was so conflicted because I was like, well, if I tell it was a man, if I tell him that I'm pregnant, is he just gonna basically say, sorry, like, we're not gonna hire him, I'm gonna lose the opportunity? Or do I tell him and really hope that, he continues with it because I'm the right person role? I ultimately decided not to say anything because I just felt like I had to protect myself.
You felt like there could be a penalty.
Yeah. I didn't want that to be like a ding against me, right? I wanted to be more on a neutral basis.
Yeah.
So what happened was, like, actually, I did get the role. And when I got the role, the same time he gave me the offer, I said, by the way, I'm 6 months pregnant. And he was like, oh. I remember that was the only thing he said. And he kind of went silent for a few seconds.
He probably thought, this is on the record. I need to think about what I need to say.
Exactly. He was like, okay, I'm representing a business.
Yeah.
Like, we're a big brand. And he was like, okay, let me come back to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this it? Like, is he going to go back to me and say, like, no, I'm sorry, we're rescinding the offer for whatever XYZ reason? But they didn't. And I started working there. And I love the company. I think the culture was wonderful. The team was great. The office was beautiful. It was in high zen, 360 view of like all Causeway Bay. But what was really difficult was the fact that I was going into a business at a very awkward time in my life when I was about to give birth in 3 months. And the role that I was going into was like a direct sales role. So imagine you're out there, you're just like getting into the white space, you're selling a product, that client jumps on board, and then you pass them off to like a relationship manager. So you're always looking for a new business.
Building new relationships, that means a lot of connectivity, a lot of new
Tons of
outreach
meetings.
work.
Exactly. So a lot of like intense, pipeline building, etc., right? And so what they decided to do was, like, instead of just saying, okay, when you come back, we'll like ramp you up, they're like, I want you to take your 3 months of ramp now, right? And take that as a time to like learn the business, come on board. And when you come back from maternity leave, you will be on like number metric right away. And then sales quota. And I was just like, at the time, I didn't push back at all.
What would have been the alternative? Like, what's the typical industry standard for coming into a new sales, B2B sales role? Is it like a 6 months ramp up before getting KPIs thrown at you? Or how is that typically contrasted for me?
So I'd say, like, when you come into like a sales role like that, where it's like new business development, you probably have a ramp. So it's like they're a lot easier on you. You have lower targets. It gives you time to actually understand your market, build your book of business, like learn from other people, right? And like actually get out there before you're really on a super high target where it's a lot more pressure, right?
And typically that's 6 months?
I would say 3 months.
3 months, okay.
Is probably quite generous already, right? Some people might give you a ramp of like a month, right? Some of the roles at Google, we give people a ramp of like 4 weeks. Like that's really fast. Like you're into it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on the business. So I think that was already quite generous, but I was asked to take the ramp prior to like my like mat leave.
Yeah.
And
Basically, you have to ramp, pause.
yes.
And then once you come back, you don't have the time to ramp. You literally
No,
need to
you
start
are on it.
and continue as if you did not just birth a human being out of you.
Yeah, like Dawn,
Yeah.
I would literally not wish this experience on my worst enemy. And I think it was so tough. I just remember, you talk about challenge, I think the first year of my motherhood was like a huge challenge for me, but like adding that on to starting a new role and like kind of coming into the job when you still have like major fog in your brain and being like, okay, I now need to find clients. I need to pitch. In between these pitches though, I need to go and pump in this room and then I need to leave again and like wash these bottles. And you know what I mean? That whole experience was just another additive stress. And I think when I look back, it was really unenjoyable, the experience.
Yeah.
I felt like I was failing at home because my daughter was at home. and I wasn't with her, I felt like I was failing at work. It was like kind of like being half in, half out all the time.
I think postpartum is already hard enough on its own.
Yeah.
And then you are taking on a high KPI job, returning back into that role. I can imagine also as you are finishing up your 14 weeks of maternity leave, I'm sure the last 4 weeks you're just in mental stress as well, thinking about how you can ramp yourself up pre-returning back to work, potentially even.
Exactly. I think that God, there's just so many things. I think, one, you're going through all these emotional roller coasters, right? So I was really lucky. I had 5 months, I think, of mat leave with LinkedIn, and that wasn't even enough. So I can't imagine if I'd only had the 14 weeks that they give you within, like, the government standard, right? You know, you're still kind of, your body is, like, all discombobulated, right? Your mind is, like, all over the place. You have a roller coaster of emotions. You're still breastfeeding, right? So you've got, like, hormones that are just all over the place. Meanwhile, you need to come back to work where you have this pressure to be equal and on par with people who have not gone through the same experience. So the expectation doesn't change, even though you've massively changed. So your KPIs are the same. The expectation of the hours that you work are the same. The pressure that you carry is the same, if not more, because there's this need and desire to be like, I need to prove myself
That I haven't dropped the ball because now I'm a new mother.
Exactly. Like, I'm just as sharp as I used to be, guys. Like, it's all good. Like, it's not like that.
Yeah. This is such an important conversation to have, and I think it's so rare we can be so honest about it, because I think it's hard to talk about because we also don't know what the potential solution could be. Is it about telling women that no, you shouldn't be switching jobs and looking for better opportunities when you're getting pregnant and planning your family building? Or are we saying, no, put your family building on hold so that you can do all the, career stuff and chase all the exciting roles that you can, and then pause to have children, and then at the time potentially to run into certain health issues and then not being able to give birth, right? It's almost like there is no perfect answer to this. And I think that's why, I think it adds to why it's such a difficult conversation, because it's almost like, so what, we talk about it. Like, what are the actual solutions? And for me, actually, it's about workplaces becoming and being consciously more fertility and family friendly. I think, and that involves multiple areas. It could be around the culture, it could be around the policies, it could be around specific benefits support, right? So that broader conversation, and I think we can get into the coaching piece. It's also super important. It's both the workplace providing a supportive environment, but it's also having the new mothers and the new parents, to be honest. I think the men also get sleep disruption from, the baby as they are becoming the father role, helping out with the night feeds and all that.
They're
right?
learning too, right? Everyone's learning. The mother, the father, and the baby.
Exactly. So I feel like, so it's for both men and women. So for the new parents, how can we better support them to navigate and move through these new roles and identities, and still be able to somehow figure out what's the best way for them to manage career and their job and their productivity in this new phase, basically. So tell me a little bit more about your role now as a coach.
Yeah, so how that kind of came about was I was kind of like the first person in my friend group to have kids. And that experience was, one, you kind of feel like you're like at the frontier and like moving into like a space where like no one's been. You're like the pioneer, like out alone by yourself, kind of like braving the storm, which maybe is brave, maybe is stupid, but regardless, very isolating in some ways. And I went through that experience, and like I mentioned, I think my first year was really, really tough. I can get more into that later, but as a result of that kind of being first mover, if you will, is like you end up having friends later who have kids who ask you for advice. And I realized, like, as I started coaching, I had more people kind of being attracted to me because I was a parent, and I think that resonated with them. And it just led me to think more and more, like, what is ultimately like my legacy, right? And I think about where I am in my life, being at this like midpoint of my life. I'm thinking, like, what's the impact that I want to have on my community? What do I want to build into the rest and like latter half of my career? And I think, as much as I think it's been a great experience working at like all these large firms, the brands are beautiful and wonderful and everyone knows them. when I die, no one is going to say, oh,
She used to work for Google.
yeah, she worked at Google. Like, I really hope to God no one says that, right? Because that's not what I want to be remembered for. What I want to be remembered for is the fact that I was kind, that I had empathy, that I helped people, that I made people feel like they were seen, that I in some way was able to like inspire people to make changes in their lives in some way, shape, or form, right? That I was a good mother, that I was present. Those are the things that I want people to be able to say about me. That's my legacy. And I think part of the coaching came about is like, well, how can I have that impact on people? And that's kind of how I started building out this business.
And as you focus your coaching on new mothers and helping them navigate into this new phase, I remember you mentioned it draws a lot of inspiration from your own personal journey also, where you sort of underestimated, because you had a relatively easy pregnancy journey, you underestimated how the postpartum and not toddler, the newborn phase, how tough it could be on you, especially when you've always been more of a high achiever. You were capable. You thought you had it all down. So
That's very true. I did.
So
I did
what
not.
went wrong? I want to hear what went wrong and what you now advise other women to work through.
Okay. The first thing is I think that I had this idea of what I was going to be like as a mother, right? And I had this expectation in my mind, and it was just very different from that. So one, you picture motherhood and you're like, oh my God, it's going to be beautiful. It's like puppies and rainbows. I'm carrying my baby and I'm happy all the time. But like, no one prepares you for the feeling of being alone. I think motherhood can be super isolating. You're feeding the baby by yourself. You're getting up in the middle of the night because you generally have to carry those responsibilities. Maybe you've been the first person in your friend group to have a kid, so you don't really know who to talk to. I just felt like when I look back in hindsight, I didn't know what I was going through, like the feelings, the hormones, the identity shifts, the rage, the happiness that was all happening at the same time. I didn't know what to call it, and I didn't know how to manage it. So in hindsight, like that was probably one of the hardest things that I went through.
So acceptance of the new stage, new emotions, and new activities was tough for you.
I think when you're like really a high achiever, right, and you're ambitious and you've been like working through your career and trying to climb this ladder, I think you think, oh, when I become a mother, it's just going to be a natural extension of that. But no one can prepare you for what it is like to have a baby, because there's no experience in life that compares to that. And it's really, like, it's ironic because it's like you can only understand when you get there, which just really fucks you up, to be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? It's like really hard. And so all of a sudden you go through this jarring change and you're like, wait, what? Like I was a type A, I was doing X, Y, Z, and now it's like I can't even like deal with this like little baby. I have nothing under my control. So I think that feeling of like grief for my past identity was like really tough for me to let go of. I felt so frustrated, like why can't I do all the things I wanted to do before in the time that I did them, whereas now it like took me an hour to get out the door, and like even then maybe I didn't get out the door because like maybe she pooped on me and then, or like she was crying, or like it was just too much. So I think like that expectation of what was going to happen, I think I wish I would have been better educated or had a better sense of like what to expect in some way, shape, or form.
And ironically though, in order to have kids, you need to have some rainbows and unicorns in your head, right? That's how procreation happens,
exactly.
right? If it's all dim and gloom, nobody has desire to have kids.
Yes.
It was precisely because you have a positive expectation in a way that led you guys to be like not stressed and have probably then get pregnant quite soon.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit ironic in that sense. And
Totally ironic.
and so when I hear it more as now when you arrive beyond the pregnancy and after the birth, when a lot of the talk has always been on the birth, you felt misaligned.
I felt misled.
Misled.
Yeah.
Missold.
Yes, I was totally oversold on this. It's like you go to these antenatal or prenatal kind of classes and like they talk about, okay, are you going to give natural birth? Like try to give natural birth. Like C-section should be your like last option. And like, okay, what do you do? Like, what's the massage? How do you make these noises? Like, you know what? Honestly, the fucking birth process is like 1% of this whole journey, if not less than that. And like, you kind of get put into the wild after, like, oh, you take this baby home, and it's like, okay, we're parents now. What do we do? And there's nothing that really helps you. There's no playbook that's like, hey, today you're going to do X, Y, Z, and it's going to be an impact of this, right? It's just like you're learning on the fly.
Yeah.
So that
It's kind of like running a startup.
exactly. It is exactly like that.
It's like you're sold on, yay, you're going to be
Entrepreneur.
IPO, like, got all the fancy stuff, you know, you got impact, purpose. And then, like, your every other day, it's basically like,
It's a
why am I
grind.
doing this?
Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for?
Yeah.
So I think that was a really tough thing. And I think the second thing that was really tough was I experienced really extreme anxiety after I had my first daughter. And I, you know, in hindsight, I should have seen a therapist much earlier than I did. And when I did see my therapist at that point, I definitely had like PTSD symptoms. So like my level of anxiety was extreme. So for example, like we lived on the 29th floor of our building, and I was so paranoid that someone would kidnap her from our floor. Like if we left her in the room by herself, that I couldn't leave her alone. So that's not normal, right? But like, I didn't know enough to be like, I should probably talk to somebody. I was just like, okay, maybe I'm just really paranoid, you know?
Where is your husband in all this? As you navigate these two big challenges, I'm sure he's somewhere around.
He is.
You know, what was his experience related to this?
You know, he's so wonderful. I have to say that. I think he's a great man, and I think he actually became a parent in a much more natural way than I did. Like he gravitated to being a parent and a father much more naturally than I ever could, and I think I learned a lot from him. Like he did it so gracefully. Everything was with patience and understanding and knowing that, okay, it's just this moment, but it doesn't last forever. Whereas I was like, I don't understand. Why won't she do this? Why won't she stop crying? And I think he was actually probably more maternal, and I learned a lot from him through that experience. And I think he helped to balance with regards to like the anxiety. I think he was actually the one who told me like, maybe you should see somebody. And I was like, I don't think I need to, you know? And there was kind of I think a shame, like why I don't want to admit that I might need help, or like that I would even be in this situation. Like I'm fine. So to his credit, I actually think that he wanted me to go, but he would never push me to do something that I wouldn't want to do.
Yeah.
So he's been incredibly supportive, a great father. And the thing is, like, we were aligned, right, on making this decision. We were aligned going through it. We were financially in a good place. We were emotionally in a good place, and our relationship was strong, right? But even when you have two people who are at their strongest, I think parenthood as a journey can break you. You know what I mean? And I mean, it didn't break us, but like you have seasons. Like you can't expect when you first have a baby that you guys are going to know what's going on. And I think I wish that we had had different conversations prior to having kids that would have maybe like helped us navigate that journey a little bit more smoothly.
So I want to get into those conversations. But before then, I do want to recognize that while having a supportive partner, you still went through all of that. So I want to debunk the myth that, you know, some people were like, oh, maybe the father was a bit more absent, that he wasn't a good partner and whatnot. What I want to say is even when you've got a strong partner, there's still so much within us as a, you know, as someone, as a new mother, that you need to navigate yourself almost to get through.
Yep.
And that aloneness isn't necessarily that your partner is not competent or not there.
No.
It's actually much more of a personal journey and experience that you are struggling with.
Absolutely. I think like as a mother, more than a father, because I think women just become a lot more influenced and impacted by the idea, like by having children, right? Like we have to, one, our bodies transform massively. Two, we end up having to take a break in our careers, right? And so like even though we're trying to incentivize people to have kids, women become marginalized. We end up having, you know, taking breaks. We may end up taking pay cuts. We may end up losing on promotions. We may end up coming back and like being at the back of the pack as a result of that lost time. Like all of these things, right? So we go through these like shifts in our identities of like, who we are now after we become mothers, right? Like, what kind of daughter am I? What kind of sister am I? What kind of wife am I? What kind of mother am I? And like all of that is happening while you are learning to like keep this baby alive, right? Like they're a lot more robust than we think, but it's so complex. And I think a lot of women, myself included at the time, you don't want to talk about it because you feel like no one's going to understand, right? I think we don't talk enough about what the resources are. We don't provide enough of the tools or frameworks or just talking about this so people know, like, hey, what I'm going through is very normal. And it's not necessarily like depression. This is very different. It's just understanding what the changes that I'm going through and how to manage those changes, and like being able to say, hey, this is an option to like really have a deeper understanding of myself and who I want to evolve into, is a very different conversation. But we don't talk about that at all. I don't think I had a conversation like that ever.
And did you have that conversation with your husband?
No, I didn't know. I think it may have come out in different parts of our conversations where I'm like, I'm feeling really angry right now. I actually hate you so much. And I hate you not because of things that you've not done, but because you aren't me. But like, how do you articulate that? Because he doesn't understand it, right? Like, he's a man. His body has not changed. Yes, he's gotten a new baby, but he didn't carry it for 9 months, right? He's not going through the hormonal imbalance that I'm going through. He's not tethered to a pump, right? Like, none of that thing. So it's really difficult for him. And I think the challenge is like, at the time, what caused disconnection in our marriage was because I didn't go to anyone else to ask for help. I didn't know who to ask. And so I relied on him to be like that everything for me, which I think a lot of women do, right? Like, you think your partner should be like your therapist, your lover, your friend,
Your baby daddy,
you know, all of that,
everything.
your confidant, whatever, right? And it's not true. And that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody.
Yeah.
Right? It's really unfair.
So you mentioned you wish you had some of those conversations before. What would those conversations look like? Just so that we, you know, for the women out there who are navigating, who are pregnant right now, what are some of the things that they should have some alignment on with their partner or their family members?
So I think one is, I always talk about values. I think people have a lot of difficulty in identifying what values mean to them. And the thing is, like, values are fluid, right? And they mean different things to different people. But I think anchoring on like what's really important to you as an individual and what you want to keep with you as you become a mother. Because once you become a mother, everyone has an opinion, right? And it's all good and it's all well-intentioned, right? Everyone wants to help you go through this process and enjoy it, but it's an opinion. And it's really easy in a moment of like vulnerability to be impacted and influenced by external voices, right? So I think having values and being really clear on what's important to you as like a mother, as a wife, as a friend, right? So you can keep that for yourself and know and be really true to like what, you know, living your values is how you actually ultimately live like a fulfilled life. Fulfillment is ideally is a circumstance, right? So if we say like, okay, we want to, you know, like have a happy marriage, that's the circumstance. But like the fulfillment of it is like the process of getting to that happy marriage, right? Of like living the value of being committed to your husband, to being present, etc. So I think value is important. The second thing is, in our marriage, one of the biggest challenges we had is we had different priorities. So my priority has always been my marriage is the foundation of everything, right? Because I believe that we model what it means to have, you know, loyalty, commitment, what it means to work through adversity, challenges, you know, things like that. My husband's priority was actually our daughter. So as you can see, that already leads to like a very varying path, right, of directions. And what that led to was, one, for me, I was like, our marriage is so important. Like, we're the foundation. We need to like work on our connection. I need to spend quality time with you. I want us to do this and that. Like, let's have these deep discussions, right? And meanwhile, he's like, I want to make sure we spend as much time with our child as possible, that she grows up and like she's happy. And, you know, neither is right or wrong. But what I'm saying is that we never had that discussion. So, you know, 6 months down the road, we've literally kind of veered apart from each other because we're exhausted. We didn't have this conversation. We don't have time to have this conversation now, nor the energy. And so then it was like, okay, how do we dovetail? What do we have to do to come back? And that's a much more difficult place to be versus if you started in the beginning, it was like, okay, as a family unit, these are the things that we want to maintain, and we will maintain them as we go through this journey, right? then you might veer, but you might not veer as widely.
To be honest, that is such an organized way to approach parenthood.
You're right, it is.
As you were talking about that, in my head, it was just saying 50% of pregnancies are unplanned. So it's like at least 50% of the people are not thinking about those things, are not having those conversations. And then the rest of the 50, even as type A and organized as you are, we're not, I guess, prepared and educated in that form, and with that perspective. And so I feel like it's the new parent journey has typically always been a challenging one for a lot of people in different ways. And a lot of times, even when they face challenge, you guys sort of figured it out. Sort of not figured it out, but like at least we're trying to figure out together to get back to where you want to be. And then I think a lot of people just increasingly drift apart and then cause a rift, right?
Yeah.
And so hopefully by having this conversation, the people who are currently struggling and whatnot get to think about it slightly differently and start thinking about what does it look like to get to a place that is not worse, that get to a place of where they can get the right support. And I don't want to use the word reconciliation, but improvement.
Yeah, I think it's so much easier to maintain a strong foundation, right? Versus having big cracks and then trying to repair. So I always go from it's like preventative. It's like with medication. You want to prevent something versus trying to treat it when it's gotten to a point where it's too late.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the perspective that I take on it. But I wish, it is a very structured way to think about it, but I do wish that we had those conversations. Like, I'm not saying that we wouldn't have gone through the same challenges.
Yeah.
But I think, when you go out into the world, like I always say in tech, right, you have like a plan, you've got a roadmap, you think about all these things. Like, why can we not apply that to this, journey of parenthood and saying, okay, like, at least if we have a plan, even if the plan doesn't go to fruition, right? At least we have something to fall back on, so we're not just like floating in like dark space. You know what I mean? Like, we have something to anchor to at least, right, to work from.
Yeah. Now, before we talk about what are some of the frameworks or the ways you coach Matrescence, I want to give motherhood a bit of a redemption from you. Of what are the positives,
Oh my
girl?
God, sorry. Okay, it's not all doom and gloom. Okay.
Tell me, or else why would you have a second?
Yes.
Right? And there must be a reason. So tell me a little bit about, you guys navigating beyond that, getting a second child, giving motherhood a bit of a redemption.
Oh man, you know what? Okay, so I talk a lot of shit about motherhood, but actually I do think motherhood is actually a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience, and I would
People
never,
listening are these crazy women who are like, one moment
"Bitch,
they're like,
you're lying." No, I would say that, okay, why we decided to have our second, I'll start there, is that we were thinking ahead, again, in a structured way, and I didn't want our child to grow up shouldering the weight of having aging parents by herself, right? And I thought we wanted her to have a companion. We didn't want her to like be the center of our world because it would be a lot of pressure for her, right? We want her to be able to have her own life, to build her own independence, and like have someone who's like equal to her as a peer to go through life together. So that was the reason for having a second, and I think we were very aligned on that idea. When it comes to motherhood, as much as I talk shit about it, I would say it is the single most gratifying experience you can go through in life. Like, I don't know, when you have children, so one of my friends actually mentioned to me once, she said, before I got pregnant, she said, when you have kids, you will love them more than you love your husband. Like, you will love your husband, of course, but you will never experience a love like the love you have for your kids. And I didn't understand it at the time because I was like, you're crazy. Like, I love this man so much. There's no way I could love someone more. And it's true. It's just, you have these babies and they come out of you, and it's just beautiful because you see them grow. They are building their own personalities. They're inquisitive. They ask you funny questions. There's just a lot of joy. And I had a fear. I remember, like, when we had our first daughter, I was like, oh my God, how will I have enough love to give to this second child? But the love grows. It doesn't, like, you don't, like, take this piece of the pie and, like, give it to someone else. It just, the pie gets bigger. And that's I don't know, it's fun. I love it. I actually love being a mother. It was just, there are ups and downs. It is not always easy. It is hard. And I just think like when in my coaching program, what we talk about is like, there's this expectation that once you have a baby, you should be super grateful and always be happy, right? Like you can't experience the bads. But what I'm trying to say is that we have to be able to accept that there are lows, right? But there are also like a lot of highs, but we have to accept both, right? As part of the journey. And like, we don't want to oversell it. Like, hey, it's not all puppies and rainbows, but that's okay. Like that's life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I'm glad that, we get a chance to talk a little bit about, how you graduated from that phase. And I would love to hear more about, when women come to you as you coach, what are, besides your experience of what you talked about, how are they feeling? What are some challenges, especially when it comes to career and coming back to the workplace that we haven't covered? And how do you help them, basically?
Yeah, I mean, women come to me for different reasons, but what I've seen as a commonality is like all women, actually, the things that we've talked about today, most women who are mothers have experienced some shape or form of this at some point in their journey. So it really speaks to me that actually there's so much that we're experiencing, but we're not talking about it. So what I do is I help women actually just break things down. So we have kind of this program where we work on the mind. We talk a lot about like the values, priorities, managing expectations, talking through the emotions that a lot of us feel, like the guilt, the shame, kind of having this identity loss, right? How do we rediscover who we are post-birth? What does that look like? Who do we want to become? What's the vision for that? So that's kind of like the program in itself. We go through lots of these different modules, from like the very foundations of really having a deeper understanding of ourselves to really going through a mode of rediscovering the things that we love about ourselves and like who we ultimately want to become, right? And how to live that on a sustainable basis. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think that's great. Yeah. I think it's much needed. And I've started seeing some companies provide some sort of return to work coach, if you will, for mothers or new parents. But I've also heard, typically because the confines of the workplace, it's a little bit more, typically people leverage it more logistically, as in, what are the policies coming back 14 weeks, or, however, like, let's say, however amount of maternity leave is allowed, how do I use flexi work? How do I, it's leveraged a little bit more logistically, I would say.
Yeah.
And I really wish that we can look into it more from a coaching perspective. How can we provide resources available for new parents as they come back into their other identity that they sort of not left behind but took a pause on as they journey into parenthood, right? I think that's really important.
So the program itself that I put together is, I wanted it to be holistic, because I do the Pilates on the side, and I've really, for myself, when I actually had my second daughter, Pilates became a huge way of how I actually aligned my core and like built a stronger core for myself. And so that kind of inspired me to be a Pilates teacher. So when I came up with the coaching program, I wanted it to have this element of like the mental side and also the physical side. So the mental side is kind of broken down into like mind, body, and community. And we go through things from talking about values, expectations, the emotions that we go through, how to re-nourish ourselves, how do we build a strong community, what does that look like? Right? What are those resources and how do we maintain that? So that's kind of the mental side of the program. And then the physical side is actually the Pilates. So I provide like a prenatal kind of like program. And then I do like PT for like recovery, right? So we have a lot of like diastasis, which is like the separation of the abs. A lot of women have lower back pain like myself. You have a very weak core normally, as you would. So it's like basically helping women to like recover from that. But I think also to be happier with their bodies and like accept their bodies, that it is a different body, but this body gave you a baby, right? So like, how do we celebrate that and be happy about it? Because I think in a place like Hong Kong especially, right, there's a lot of emphasis on how we look, a certain expectation of like body shape and size. And I think that's so tough on like women. Like that's one of the things that I have like clients come to me about is like my recovery of my body is just not where I wanted it to be, and I'm comparing myself to other women, and it makes me super unhappy, right? Like, how do we manage those expectations for ourselves?
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love how you also focus a lot more on the holistic part, because you can't really feel well without the physical side and the mental side.
Yeah.
And we all know that when, I think these few years, we talk a lot more about the mental health and whatnot, but because labor is such a, and childbearing and raising is such a physical endeavor as well, it really requires a holistic approach when it comes to figuring it out.
Yeah, they go hand in hand, right? Like, your mental really affects your physical, and your physical affects your mental. So, like, they both have to be addressed.
Yeah. So now with, your coaching program and working a lot more with clients, I'm curious what you think about, what are the systemic barriers here in Hong Kong that women face as they navigate into parenthood, and what are some suggestions that you think would have been helpful for them?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to this expectation of wanting to increase the population, but yet we put a burden on women and we don't give them enough resources. But if we really were to go into something that I think is actually, practical and tangible that could be implemented in a business, is actually something that I've been hearing feedback on from like some of my posts on LinkedIn is, giving managers training to help them understand, as one of their, women employees kind of go into maternity leave, like, one, how to help her prepare for that, and two, more importantly, like, how to manage their re-onboarding and reintegration back into corporate work life. Because I think if you start with managers having a better understanding of like how motherhood has affected their, priorities, their time, the pressure, the anxiety they may feel about coming back, about being behind, the desire to have more flexibility, the resources of having a space to like pump and like being given time. So I think if we had training around that for managers to understand how to support women who are coming back to work, maybe more women would go back into the workplace, like feeling better about it, or they'd feel better leaving, right? Just knowing that I'm coming back to a place where I'm going to feel more supported. Versus like coming back and feeling like I'm alone in this. Maybe I'm in a team of all men, none of them have kids. How am I going to navigate saying I need to leave this meeting early because I need to go home? Or what am I going to say? I have to pump. I can't be here right now. Like, women are put in a position where it's like we have to kind of make excuses, or we have to like apologize for being mothers. And that has to change, right? And I think that changes in a corporate setting of just creating more education and awareness around what happens to women as they go through this transition.
Yeah, and that's important, because we also see in some specific industries, like let's say law or accounting, right? It's so typical for women to just leave the sales side, if you will, and get into in-house, because they know they're going to family building, right? We know these things exist, and yet we haven't put a dollar value behind it. Yet we don't have policies and programs are really trying to mitigate that in the first place, and allow women to feel more supportive, such that they don't have to leave a specific job in order to look for another lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully we are continuing to improve the situation. As you yourself, myself, I think I've met a lot more women and men now that are trying to change some of these things in Hong Kong and also regionally.
Slowly but surely.
Thank you, Tingi, for coming in today and sharing your very personal journey and how you became a Matrescence coach. If you all like our content, please remember to like and subscribe our podcast. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.